All right, this is chapter 2 for Scat. As they were walking home from the bus stop, Nick told Marta, "It's not over between those two. You just wait." "I'm so glad there's no class tomorrow," she said. "I can't deal with this. She's a witch, and he's a total moron." The science classes were taking an all-day field trip to the Black Vine Swamp, which was way out near the Big Cypress Preserve. Mrs. Starch herself had picked the location, describing it as a festival of photosynthesis. The swamp was famous for exotic orchids and ancient cypress trees, but Nick was hoping to see a panther. "We'll probably catch malaria from the mosquitoes," Marta said, "but it can't possibly be more painful than her stupid biology class." Nick laughed. "We haven't even had rain for 2 weeks. There won't be any mosquitoes." "Spiders then, whatever." Marta waved and turned up the driveway of her house. Nick lived 3 blocks away in the same subdivision. His house was actually closer to the bus stop, but lately he had been taking the long way home so he could walk with Marta. From the front step, she called back to him, "Hey, do you think he's going to show up for the field trip?" "Smoke? Who else?" Nick said, "I hope not." "Me too." Marta waved once more and disappeared through the doorway. As soon as Nick got home, he hurried to the computer in the den and checked his email. He was waiting to hear from his father, a captain in the National Guard who, for the last 7 months, had been stationed in the Anbar province of Iraq. Nick's dad emailed almost every morning, but Nick and his mother hadn't heard from him in 3 days. This had happened before when his father was on a field mission with his unit. Nick had tried not to let himself worry. His mom was a guard at the Collier County Jail. She got off work at 4:30 in the afternoon and was usually home by 5:15 at the latest. Nick stayed at the computer researching an English paper and rechecking his email every few minutes. By the time his mom came in the door, she'd still heard nothing from his father. "How was your day?" his mom asked. "Some kid ate Mrs. Starch's pencil." "You wouldn't believe it," Nick said. "Gobbled it right out of her hand." "Any particular reason?" "Well, he was mad, I guess. She made fun of him and a big zit on his neck." Nick's mother set her purse heavily on the kitchen counter. "Tell me again why we're spending so much money to send you to a private school." "Wasn't my idea," Nick reminded her. "Smaller classes?" "Well, that was one reason. And better teachers, you said." "So we've been told." "And the low freak factor," Nick said. "Right," his mother frowned. "And now you're telling me there's a boy in biology who thinks he's a termite?" "More like a beaver," Nick said, "but Mrs. Starch shouldn't have made fun of him. He's not a kid you want to mess with." Nick's mother took a bottle of V8 juice from the fridge and emptied it into a small glass. "What's the pencil eater's name?" she said. "Dwayne Scrood." "Do you know him?" "Spelled Scrod?" Nick said, "Yeah, that's right." "Then it's Dwayne Scrood Jr. I know his father, Dwayne Sr. "From the jail?" Nick's mom nodded. "He did 6 months after burning down a Chevy dealership in Port Charlotte, all because his Tahoe blew a transmission on Alligator Alley." No wonder the kid turned out the way he did, Nick thought. His old man's a whack job. "What's for dinner?" Nick asked his mother. "Spaghetti, spaghetti, or spaghetti?" "Guess I'll try spaghetti." "Excellent choice." "Hey, did Dad email you at work today?" "No, how about you?" "Not yet," Nick said. His mother managed a smile. "Don't worry, he's probably away from base camp. I'll go look on the computer again." "Let's eat first, Nicky. You know what? I'm not really in the mood for pasta. Why don't we go out for some barbecue?" "Are you sure, Mom?" "Sure as can be," she said, finishing off the juice. "What's time in Iraq now?" "Like 1:30 in the morning." "Oh, then he's probably asleep anyways." "Yeah," Nick said. "I bet he's sleeping. I bet we'll hear from him tomorrow." The headmaster, Dr. Dressler, was neat and cautious and mild-spoken. He was the happiest when the Truman School ran smoothly and in harmony was in the air. He was unhappy when the students and the faculty were buzzing and distracted. "Tell me exactly what happened," he said to Mrs. Starch. She held up a half-eaten pencil. "The young man has serious anger control issues," she said. Dr. Dressler examined the evidence. "And you're sure he didn't spit out the rest?" "Oh, no, he swallowed it," Mrs. Starch reported. "Most definitely." "Why didn't you send him to the nurse's station?" "Because he stormed out of my classroom," she said, adding with disapproval, 16 minutes before the bell. 16 full minutes. "The splinters could be harmful to his internal organs." "I'm well aware of that, Dr. Dressler. The boy's parents should be notified as soon as possible and informed at the same time of his disruptive and unacceptable actions." Of course, Dr. Dressler said. Like everybody else at Truman School, he tried to avoid Mrs. Starch whenever possible. Ever since taking the headmaster job, he heard strange stories that she lived alone, yet no one ever seemed to know whether she was divorced or was a widow. According to one rumor, her house was filled with stuffed dead animals, such as skunks and raccoons. According to another gossip, she kept 53 snakes as pets, including a diamondback rattler. Officially, Mrs. Starch's private life was none of Dr. Dressler's business. As a teacher, she was punctual, thorough, and hardworking. Students might be afraid of Mrs. Starch, but they also learned plenty from her. Truman classes always scored exceptionally well on the biology questions in the PSATs and the SATs. Still, Dr. Dressler couldn't help but wonder if the weird tales about Mrs. Starch were true. He found himself uncomfortable in her presence, probably because Mrs. Starch was so large and imposing, and spoke to him as if he was a half-witted nephew. She said, "I'll be happy to phone Dwayne's parents myself." "That's all right. You've got the field trip tomorrow. We're all packed and ready to go, Dr. Dressler." Very good," he said impassively, "but I'll contact the Scroods. It's my responsibility." "Oh, I don't really mind," Mrs. Starch said, a bit too cheerily. "Let me handle it, please." Mrs. Starch rose to leave, and Dr. Dressler carefully sealed the mangled remains of the pencil into a plastic bag that they used for sandwiches. "The pencil was in my hand when he attacked it. He could have easily nipped off my fingers," Mrs. Starch said. "I assume disciplinary measures will be taken." The Truman School had a detailed code of conduct for students, but offhand the headmaster couldn't think of a rule that applied to eating a teacher's pencil. He supposed that it fell under the category of unruly behavior. "What prompted Dwayne to do something like this?" he asked Mrs. Starch. "He became angry when I asked him to write a paper," she explained, "and the reason I gave him the paper was he failed to do the class reading assignment. As a result, he was unable to discuss the study material when called upon." "I see." Dr. Dressler opened a drawer and deposited the baggy containments. By the way, will you be coming along on our field trip?" Mrs. Starch asked. "You can ride with me." "I'm afraid I can't," the headmaster replied quickly. "I've got a board meeting in the morning, Board of Trustees." And if there's no meeting, Dr. Dressler thought, I'll arrange one. He was not an outdoors person, and his contact with nature was limited to a glimpse of wildlife on Animal Planet, while he flipped channels between cooking shows. Dr. Dressler was certain that any place called the Blackvine Swamp was no place he wanted to be. "You don't know what you're missing," Mrs. Starch told him. "I'm sure you're right." After she left his office, Dr. Dressler phoned the Scrood household. A man answered, growled something that Dr. Dressler couldn't understand, and hung up. Perplexed, Dr. Dressler pulled out the file of Dwayne Scrood Jr. It showed that the boy had been held back 2 years in elementary school, and later was expelled from the public middle school for fighting with his PE teacher. During that scuffler, the teacher lost 3 teeth and the tip of a pinky, which Dwayne had gnawed off and consumed. Dr. Dressler thought, this seems to be a pattern here. The mystery of how a person like Dwayne Scrood Jr. got accepted into the Truman School was solved when Dr. Dressler came across a letter from the previous headmaster reflecting a large cash donation from Dwayne's wealthy grandmother, who was paying his tuition. Dr. Dressler concluded that it would be bad for the Truman School and a fortune endowments if young Dwayne became seriously ill from the devouring Mrs. Starch's pencil. He put away the file and somewhat wearily headed to the parking lot, where he got into his car and, using his nifty dashboard GPS, he made his way to the address of Mr. Dwayne Scrood Sr. The unpainted blockhouse sat along the unpaved road through some pine scrubs on the outskirts of Naples. By the time Dr. Dressler arrived, the sun had set and the woods were humming with night insects. In the driveway sat numerous vehicles, none of them well maintained. There was a battery pickup truck, a motorcycle with crooked handlebars, a mud-splattered ATV on blocks, and a dented minivan missing 2 doors, and an SUV upon which someone had painted on orange letters, "Boycott Smithers Chevy." Although no lights were on the inside of the house, the front windows were open, and Dr. Dressler could hear classical music, which he found encouraging. It was Bach concerto. The headmaster straightened his necktie and rang the bell. When no one responded, Dr. Dressler began to knock. Eventually, a lean, unshaven man appeared at the screen door. He wore hunting garb, a red trucker's cap, and no shoes. "You, from the government?" The man pointed aggressively at Dr. Dressler with a rusty pair of pliers. If you're here about taxes, don't be surprised if I pull off your lips and feed 'em to my bird. I got a macaw, speaks 3 languages. Dr. Dressler resisted the impulse to run away. I'm from Truman School, he stammered. Are you Dwayne's father? I am, the man said. How about some ID? Nervously, Dr. Dressler drew a business card from his inner pocket of his suit jacket. Dwayne Scrood Sr. snatched the card and disappeared for several minutes. When he returned, a large bird with brilliant blue and gold plumage was perched on his left shoulder. With its crusty hooked beak, the macaw was shedding Dr. Dressler's card. Dwayne Scrood Sr. opened the screen door and propped it open with one knee. What did DJ do now? He asked. DJ, Dwayne Jr., I know you must have done something bad because you're here, and B, he's not. Do you want to come inside? Dr. Dressler shook his head politely and said no thanks. Your son had what I call a disagreement with one of his teachers today. A homework issue, from what I understand. Is this front page news? When Dwayne Scrood Sr. laughed and the macaw laughed too. It was a perfect imitation of Dr. Dressler. It was totally creepy. He realized that he had made a mistake by visiting this house. Dwayne Jr. obviously hadn't told his father what had happened in Mrs. Starcher's class and undoubtedly had no intention of telling his father, even if he got sick as a dog from eating a pencil. I don't see why you drove all the way out here, Dwayne Scrood muttered. Did my dear old ex-mother-in-law call up the school or something? Light a spark under your bottom? No, Mr. Scrood, this was my idea. Dr. Dressler was itching to leave. I just wanted to check on your son and get his side of the story. Clarify our homework policy, to avoid further confusion about his responsibilities. Confusion, Dr. Dwayne Sr. cackled, followed uncannily by his macaw. DJ ain't confused. DJ's just DJ. Well, his teacher and I were concerned, Dr. Dressler said, which was only half true. Mrs. Starch hadn't seemed concerned at all. You should be aware that DJ swallowed a pencil at school today and he might need to see a doctor. Dwayne Scrood Sr. snorted. The boy's got an iron stomach. When he was little shrimp, he used to eat rocks, oysters, lug nuts, and a piano wire. A pencil won't hurt him, that's for sure. Still, I'd feel better if I could speak with him, the headmaster said. Well, like I said, he's not here, and he hasn't got home from school yet. Dr. Dressler couldn't hide this concern, but classes ended hours ago. It's already dark out, Mr. Scrood. You've got good eyes. Did DJ call to say why he'd be late? Just chill out, guy. Wasn't there soccer practice after school, the headmaster said. Maybe he's still at the ball field. Dwayne Scrood Sr. informed Dr. Dressler that Dwayne Jr. wasn't on the soccer team, the football team, the lacrosse team, or any other team at Truman. He keeps to himself, Dwayne Scrood Sr. said. Rides solo, you might say. His granny bought him a new cell phone, but I don't believe he's ever answered it. Dr. Dressler felt a stickly wave of apprehension. He had a mental image of Dwayne Jr. lost in the woods, withering in agony, his innards full of needle-sharp pencil splinters. This followed by an equally unpleasant vision of Dr. Dressler himself being fired by the Truman Board of Trustees and then getting dragged into court by the Scrood family. Sometimes DJ doesn't come through the door until way late, Dwayne Sr. was saying. I don't bother to wait up. He's a sizable young man, and not many folks are dumb enough to mess with him. Dr. Dressler took another business card out and wrote his home phone number on the back. Would you mind calling me as soon as you or Mrs. Scrood hear from your son? There's no Mrs. Scrood here, Dwayne Sr. said at the moment. Oh, I'm sorry. What for? We get by just fine, don't we, Nadine? And the macaw made a purring noise and nibbled from the fray collar of Dwayne Scrood Sr.'s hunting jacket. Dr. Dressler handed him a card with his phone number to the man, who immediately gave it to the bird. Don't you worry about Junior, he said. He'll show up when he shows up. Now, good night. Dr. Dressler hustled down the driveway towards his car, which out of habit he had locked. While groping for his keys, he heard an animal scurrying through the shrub, and he felt the heartbeat quicken. The scent of pine needles made Dr. Dressler sneeze violently, and he was startled by a voice from inside the darkened house. Bless you, Nadine squawked. And that's the end of chapter 2.